Welcome to Nimble Minds Talks of Self and Spirituality, where I talk about different philosophical perspectives as well as spiritual practices. And I also just talk about topics I generally find interesting and I believe can bring, just some insights and not only make whoever's watching, whoever's listening ask more questions, but it also makes me ask more questions. So that's why I really am interested and why I love it, okay? So, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get into the topic of this video, which is going to be, once again, I say this every video pretty much, it's still going to go dive into the temptations. It's still going to get into dealing with temptations, especially lust, right? And being able to have self control, right, for your spirit and your soul. But I am going to be talking about being comfortable with yourself, being happy with that person in the mirror, being happy with who God created, right? Because we know that you have parents, a mother and a father, people come together, they love each other, and they have a kid. But at the end of the day, God also has a hand in that creation, okay? So just we're gonna talk about being comfortable with who you are, okay, and the person that God helped to create, okay? So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. So the point is going to be stemming from really just society, okay, and the pressures that can come from it. A lot of times, especially in the times we're in now, there's a lot of pressures for people to want to change the way they look, okay? There's a lot of pressures for people to not want to be comfortable with how they look, who they are, and the way they may think about things, okay? Not to say that maybe they can still improve of their mentality by reading certain things they're interested in, or they can still change the way they look naturally by maybe working out and maybe changing things in their diet and staying consistent, right? Consistency is the name of the game. But especially in today's society, we can see that a lot of people like to go a more unnatural route. People would much rather have surgeries, and I'm not talking about people who get into some health scares or health accidents and then they require some surgeries. That's a whole different thing. I can understand that. Trust me, I can understand that. But I'm talking about people who have their health is perfectly fine. They have all their faculties together, and for example, maybe there's a certain way that they perceive their face to look. Okay, I'm gonna be the first one to tell you, hey, I'm not embarrassed to say it, but there's been women that I have liked in my life that if I had told people that I actually like this person, they probably wouldn't even believe me. They because of the way society views people and the way that certain people look, they'd be like, "You like that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's just me." But at the end of the day, there's a push for people to want to change themselves in unnatural ways, to get these surgeries, okay, to change their face, maybe change their chin, or maybe change their nose, or change the way, like, they're just all types of things, okay? And in my opinion, that's not okay. That's not something I personally support. At the end of the day, people have their own reasons. So, hey, I don't know what their reason is. I don't know what their struggles are. So, hey, if that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. But personally, I don't support that. And then on top of that, then there's the body. Let's say there's somebody who is, you know, they want a certain abs or something. There's surgeries now where people can get adjustments and have abs implanted, okay? There's all types of like weight surgeries. There's people who may be a certain weight they're not comfortable with. And instead of, trying to put in some time to really grind, they would rather get a surgery, okay? They'd rather, get BBLs and all this other stuff, right? To try to get a certain look. And what ends up happening, which is ultimately why I don't support it, is people start to look the same. And not only do people start to look the same, it's unnatural. Some people like it just really unnatural looking. And there's some people that like it, okay? So I'm sure once again, if there is a demand, there's going to be a supply, right? But still, people should be more supportive of themselves. People should be more supportive of the gifts they were given instead of trying to change that which they were given, okay? So instead of wanting to, maybe hit the gym a little bit more often and maybe just something simple in the gym, but then on top of that, maybe change something in your diet, okay? And then do some mental work as well. People would rather go and get surgeries to have that changed, okay? And that's just one aspect. But then on top of that, you have some people out here that after they get these surgeries, after they get certain things changed about their natural look, God's look, okay, they, you know, they start to brag about it. That's just like the icing on the cake, you could say. Now they have a whole different attitude. And it's like, you don't even actually look like that, though. Like, you had to get surgery and you're doing all these unnatural things to change the way that you look. So you're really lying to yourself and lying to everyone else as well, because you actually don't look like that. You actually got surgery, took whatever pills, ever you needed to do that, and it really wasn't natural. So me personally, that's just the irony in some of that is some people do that, okay, and change those things. And those are like the major things. That's why I'm just not, I just don't support that. I do not support that, okay. I do not support that at all. So you need to be comfortable with who you are. Another thing, even when it comes to height, okay, there's things that, people start, and this is not a popular thing. I don't believe it is. I hope it's not. But there was just one thing I saw about this. It was only one story, but I am going to speak about it just because I did see it. There was a story of this one guy who got surgery to increase his height, and that was just like having surgery and having to recover from it is a whole different thing. So for people to willingly be going into surgeries like that massive when it has to do with changing your face, changing your weight, and then trying to change your height and all that, that is just, I don't understand that personally. But self-hate can do a lot, okay? Not being happy with God, with what God has made and what God has given you, and even your parents have given you, is, that's not okay. So there's a story I saw of someone who got a height surgery to increase their height. And the issue with that is, once again, you're lying to yourself, because that's not who you are. You're not actually that tall. And this is coming from a guy, I'm like, what? I'm a short guy. I'm 5'6" on a good day, right? So, I grew up short, and there were times where I was like, dang, I could be taller, right? That's just, naturally, because I had that pressure of society. But as I got older, I came to appreciate my height, and I literally would not trade it for anything. Like, if I got offered for free to do stuff that could increase my height, I'd be like, no, I'm perfectly fine. Like, I have no problem being the height I am, okay? I love it, and it's just, I love it, okay? I am happy with what I've been given by not only my parents, but by God, okay? So I have no complaints over here, okay? If I had to have that conversation with God, I'd be like, look, thank you, okay? I ain't trying to really change nothing. But there's some people who have and will continue to change, their features, okay? Instead of appreciating the beauty that they already have, the beauty that is already not only within them, but once they recognize it's within them, it will start to show itself on the outside of them. There's people who just won't see it, and that does sadden me in some cases, because there are some people who, they're just so ingrained into what other people think about them that they really have to live for the world, the worldly things, and live for others instead of being able to live for their own spirit and their own soul and live for themselves, okay? So this gets into the temptations, okay? Well, how does this get into the temptations? Nimble minds, nimble minds. Yes, please ask the questions. Please do. Nimble minds, nimble minds. How does this get into the temptations, okay? Because we're just on the topic of people saying, okay, they're just going to change the way they look, okay? But people could change their weight. People can change their face. People can change all types of things about the way they look, right? Even if it's like major surgeries, but, it doesn't have to affect them, right? They can still resist temptations. Great question, okay? I'll answer that the best I can. So when it comes to the temptations, it includes a lot of things, okay? Lust is a big one, and we will get to how that is engaging in the lust. But it's also engaging in the deceit, the lying, the gluttony, okay? It's the jealousy, the envy, okay? It's also all of those temptations as well. So when you're a person who eventually you grow up, okay, and you're still not comfortable with who you are, what your parents have given you, what God has given you, right? That is a type of jealousy, a type of envy, because where do people get that feeling from, wanting to change who they are, not being comfortable with who they are, okay? Well, social media is a big thing, and then also society, okay? Because not just social media, but there's people who create social media, so that means it's maybe a parent thing, okay? And then the history of at least America when it comes to people wanting to lighten their skin, people not being comfortable with their beautiful God-given melanated skin. It comes to a point where there is a self-hatred there, okay? And the thing about this is, yes, mainly melanated people, because I am a melanated person, but this goes for everyone as well, okay? Everyone can get a surgery, and everyone does get surgeries, okay? Not saying like everybody, but any group of people have and will get surgeries to change their appearance. And where do they get these ideas from? Social media, okay? Their peers, okay? When they're around other people and they hear them having their conversations about things they prefer, and them being young and being impressionable and not having grown to understand that they can have a mindset of their own, and understand that they don't have to take on the perspectives and opinions of other people because they've had a certain experience in their life that may not give them perspectives and opinions that are actually accurate to being fruitful and positive to the growth of a child and the growth of a person. So when it comes to things like that, then you have people who will say, for example, now your nose isn't good, okay? You need to change that, okay? Your height isn't good. Now you're gonna have to change that, okay? These people that people look up to, like people that are in the spotlight, mainly celebrities. And there's nothing wrong with inspiration. There's nothing wrong with supporting people in their careers. There's nothing wrong with that. But there is a level that some people do get to where it is a type of worship. It is a type of idol worship, and that's not okay. Okay, but there's nothing wrong with being a supporter. There's nothing wrong with being a person who is just in tune with other people, in my opinion. But there is a type of worship where it can get unhealthy, and it can get detrimental to one's own mental state, okay? So then you have people out here who are trying to look like other people. That's when the jealousy comes in. That's when the envy comes in. They're envying the way someone else looks, okay? And it's not just like they're being inspired. No, they're envying. They're being jealous. They almost want to be like this other person, be in this other person's shoes. Now they're not okay with the way their face looks. Now they're not okay with the way their body's shaped. Now they're not okay with their height. Now they're not okay with their mindset and the way that they think. Now they're not okay with maybe even their skin tone, okay? Now people may want to lighten their skin, okay? Now people may want to lighten their skin for what? Why? Now people, because that's the things people have been programmed to believe that they need to do in order to be accepted in a society, okay? I'm going to ask you this. Why would you want to be accepted by anything other than God first, okay? Why would you want to be accepted by anything other than God first, okay? Not saying that if you seek approval of other people, go ahead, go for it. But why would you not want to be accepted by God first, okay? Instead of trying to, get the opinions and get the good standing of other people who at the end of the day probably don't even actually care about you, okay? People have their own lives. People have their own families. People have their own things they're worried about. And for you to go and change the way you look because you're jealous and you're envious of someone else, that's, in my opinion, I don't support that. I don't believe that's okay. So you have people out here that do these things and listen to what other people say. And once again, I have been a person that has been there before. When I was younger, like mainly freshman in high school, middle school, I was a person who was affected deeply by like just the appearance of other people you see on the screen. And that's natural when you're young. You're just easily affected by things like that. You're still growing. But I was still a person that was affected, believing I needed to wear certain clothes. I needed to have certain brands, okay? And just certain material things to be accepted. And at the end of the day, there's an aspect in this life, in this world, right, where there's people who think like that. There's people who, if you have a certain brand, you have certain cars, certain shoes, certain clothes, sure. But eventually for me, and I hope whoever's watching, whoever's listening, you get to this point. Eventually for me, I realized there was only a certain acceptance and a certain approval I really seek and I really believe was actually important to me, okay? And it had nothing to do with the approval of other people, okay? Although, yes, okay, respect other people. I'm not saying that everyone's bad and this and that, but If you're in a situation where you have to get the approval of somebody with material things and not just being your own self and who you are, that's the wrong situation, and you need to remove yourself and go very far, okay? So, with that being said, once again, there's people who can be affected by this, okay, and they will start to change things about themselves and their own personality and even try to pick up aspects of other people when they just need to truly be themselves, okay? I said this in another video. One of the biggest lies I ever heard was that you need to fake it until you make it. You need to not be yourself. And you know what? For some people, in their life, that's true for them, but I urge you to not let that be true for you, okay? You, whoever's watching, whoever's listening, I urge you, and I hope you don't fake it until you make it, okay? Because at the end of the day, what is faking it until you make it? You don't make lies. You never win lies. You never win faking anything, because at the end of the day, it's what you said it is. It's fake. It was not real, okay? So you can lie to yourself for only so long, okay? That's the truth. You can only lie to yourself for so long. So, if you're, once again, you have to be comfortable with who you are. Now, let's continue with the temptations. It also gets into what else? The deceit, the lying, okay? You're deceiving yourself and you're trying to deceive other people when you're changing these major things about yourself, okay? When you're changing your weight, when you're changing, whole surgeries on your face to readjust how you look, whether that's your nose or your lips or like your jawline, okay, things like that. Like you're literally lying to yourself, because it's not like, and even braces and things like that. I've had braces before, right? That's like the major thing I've had, right? But in my opinion, things like that, that's more understandable. Like, oh, okay, whatever, okay. Even the hairline to an extent, okay, but when you're going and you're changing your whole nose, like your whole structure, like of your face, like your nose, your lips, your chin, your jawline, and then your weight, and you're like, that stuff is just so unnatural. That stuff is so unnatural, and I really don't support it. And that's how it gets into the deceit and the lying. You're lying to yourself. You're deceiving yourself. You don't look like that, okay? You don't look like that. You don't actually look like that, okay? So you went out here and started to believe that you needed to look like things on the screen. So now you're lying to yourself. Now you're deceiving yourself, okay? And then now you're believing the lie. You're believing the deceit because you can't be honest with yourself, and you can't say, you know what? I've been created in a certain image, okay? My parents did what they had to do to bring me here, and God had a hand in that as well. So you're not accepting that, okay? And you're just not being honest with yourself, and you're trying to lie and deceive yourself. That's not okay. I don't support that. It also gets into the lust, okay? And this is especially when it comes to things like the ab surgeries and the, all the surgeries. Because when you think about it, why are people getting these surgeries? There's men out there that get surgeries as well. And then the women, why are there women out there that are out here getting these BBL surgeries and all these surgeries, right? Well, it's because they want attention. That's what it is. When people look at them, they want a reaction. And most of the time they want it to be lustful, okay? They want a man to look at them and think about sleeping with them. They want a man to look at them and think about having her around his arm. But if you're already listening to my videos, and you listening to what I'm saying, whoever's watching, whoever's listening, okay, you already know. If you run into a situation and you already sense that you're in an environment where these women are trying to get you to lust and subtract from your plus and have them thinking about them around your arm, you already know. Sound the alarm, okay? If you're in a situation where you have women trying to get you to look at them so they can have you imagining them around your arm, sound the alarm, okay? Because you don't give into the temptations, you don't give into the lust, you don't give into that, okay? Because you have self-control to feed your spirit and your soul, okay? You don't give into that. You actually have some self-awareness, you have some self-control, and you understand that, hey, at the end of the day, they're going to try to take a toll, but you're going to stand, okay? And you're not going to give into your urges. That's not what you're going to do. But that's what I'm saying. That's how that goes into lust, okay? You have people getting these surgeries, so people are eyeing them, so people are looking at them. Oh my goodness, look at them. Those are the reactions subconsciously people want when they change the way they look. When they're changing their bodies, when they're trying to get that waist, when they're trying to get that taste, when they're trying to get that BBL waist, okay? All that stuff. All that stuff is for attention and it's for lust. And that's not okay. That's not okay. I don't support it. So, if you're a person, whoever's watching, whoever's listening, you need to be comfortable and work towards being comfortable with who you are, okay? Because it starts from a young age. That's the sadness in it. That's what saddens me. It starts from a young age when you have these children seeing all these things on the screen. And it's not all bad, but when you have people seeing, young kids seeing these things on the screen, young children, the children out here, the childs, they're absorbing this information, and what they're getting is, I have to look like that in order to be successful. And that's the biggest lie that's ever been told. You need to look like you, and you need to be you in order to get through, okay? You need to look like you, and you need to be you in order to push through, okay? That's the truth. The lie is, you need to look like everybody else but yourself. You need to be everything else but who you actually are. That's the biggest lie, okay? You need to be yourself. And you need to be comfortable with who you are, okay? If you're a person who out there, maybe you got a little belly fat, you better start loving that belly fat, okay? I don't care. You better start loving that belly fat. And if you really want to change it, then start putting in a little work, okay? A little bit here in the gym, a little bit with a diet, so you can actually change something. But you better love that belly fat. If you're a person out there that maybe there's something about your face that people call strange, you better start loving that. You better start loving that. You better start appreciating that, because I'll tell you what, there's somebody out there that's going to love that. And there's somebody out there that's probably meant for you, but when you go through with the surgery and change your face and change who you are, now you lost the opportunity with that person because they can't actually see you anymore. They aren't going to be able to recognize who you are because you try to change your face so you can look like the people who are promoted as the stars. You went out here and changed who you are. They're not going to be able to recognize who you are because you went in your face and you try to change your way to look like somebody who was promoted as a star. I put that in quotes, okay? Because these people are promoted as that. They're not that, but that is the issue, okay? People are out here actually missing out on the people who are actually meant for them, who actually would care for them and give them that fairy tale love, give them that, shape of a dove, all that stuff, because they're changing who they are. And now the people who are for them can't even recognize them. They can't even recognize them because they look like everybody else. Their face looks like everybody else. That BBL looks like everybody else. Your body looks like everybody else. There's nothing special about that at all. And people are being lied to and believing the tomfoolery, the tomhoolery, the tom jewelry, and all the stuff, okay, because they aren't comfortable with who they are, okay? That's the truth. They're not comfortable with who they are. So they're changing everything about how they look to try to get a couple looks. They're changing everything about how they look to get a couple looks, okay? And at the end of the day, there is a reality to it. And the reality is, there's some people who just don't want to hear that. There's people who are like, you know what? I'm going to get the surgery. And okay. Go get that surgery. There's people out here that are going to change their face. Okay, go do that. There's people out here that are going to get the high surgery. Okay, get the high surgery. There's people out here that are going to go get the ab surgery. Okay, go get the ab surgery. There's people here who are still going to do it anyway. Okay, but there's people out there who, whoever's watching, whoever's listening, just need to understand. And they do understand, okay, but they just believe that they're the only person who, no. You're beautiful the way you are. Okay, you're beautiful the way you are. What if I told you you are already a star? You're beautiful the way you are. What if I told you are already a star? Okay, but the society we live in is promoted that if you change the way you look, okay, then you're going to be this. But the truth is, the more you try to change your appearance, the more you try to change and you cause this interference, the farther away from ever being a star you'll be. The farther away from having that spirit, your soul, you'll ever be. The farther away you actually get from the true self. And now you're causing yourself to be in a situation where you might never see who you were truly meant to be, okay? And that's unfortunate, okay? That is unfortunate. But the bright side of that, the positive side of that, okay, is that there are people out there who will understand eventually. And it's just going to take a little bit of time because there's people out there that are young. Okay, there's people out there who are just they're just young and they're going through the motions of being young and growing up and having the stuff in their face, the propaganda that you need to change your ways and change your all types of features about yourself in order to be in a certain position. And eventually they will realize that is the beautiful thing that does bring me happiness, is that there's people out there that will realize they have everything that they need. There's people out there that will realize that God gave you everything that you need. There's people out there that will realize you are perfectly fine the way you are. You are beautiful just the way you are, okay? You're amazing just the way you are, okay? And you don't need to change that for anybody. You don't need to change that for anybody, okay? If you're going to seek approval from anybody, the Most High first, the Lord first, God first, okay? The Son first, okay? That's who you want the approval from. And I'll tell you what, that one of the ways you can get that approval is to, first of all, appreciate who you are, appreciate who's been created, appreciate the person in the mirror, and not change that for anybody else, okay? And just be yourself. So that's how that can, stem into lust, okay? Wanting to change your appearance and who you are. And there is societal pressures and peer pressure, okay, that do cause people to do these things about themselves and not be comfortable with who they are, and it causes them to fall into jealousy and envy and things that are just not, that are very distasteful, things that are very, just a negative energy, okay? Things that subtract from their plus, okay? And I urge you, whoever's watching, whoever's listening, I urge you to not do those things. And if you have already done those things, oh, wow, you still need to understand that you can be comfortable with who you are. You can still be comfortable with the person you are. You can still be comfortable with your mindset, okay? Because at the end of the day, a lot of people try to change the look of something. A lot of people want the look of something to be different, the appearance of something to be different, but that doesn't change what it is. That does not change what it is. Once again, a lot of people want the look to be different, the appearance to be different. That does not change what it is. That will never change the spirit. That will not change the soul that resides within people. That just doesn't change that, okay? A lot of people want to change who they are. Maybe change their nose. Be comfortable with your nose. God gave you that nose. Want to lighten their skin, change their skin. Be comfortable with that skin. God gave you this skin, okay? God blessed a lot of people, and a lot of people have not realized their blessing yet. A lot of people have not realized their blessings yet. A lot of people are out there messing up their blessings. A lot of people out there are messing up their blessings. I'm going to say this again. A lot of people are messing up their blessings because they're believing a message from somewhere else, from someone else who doesn't even actually care about you. They just want money. They just try to make some money, okay? And once again, I hold out hope. Maybe there are people out there who do these surgeries in good faith, okay? I do hold out hope. But I can tell you a majority of the stuff, people just want to make their money, okay? So you need to seek approval of the Most High. You need to seek approval of God first, okay? You need to seek approval of the spirit, the soul, the person that's going to be with you, okay? The person that's not going to lie to you, okay? The person that's going to tell you the truth, even when it's hard, even when it's rough, okay? Because this could be rough for some people. It could be hard for some people to hear that they are beautiful the way they are. They don't need to change who they are, okay? They're already a star, okay? And the more and more they change, the more they move afar, okay? There's some people who need to hear that, and that's a hard truth for some people, okay? But it's a beautiful truth, okay? It was a hard truth for me at one point, but once I accepted that, I was able to just accept who I am, where I'm at, and be the happiest person and just be very joyful because the spirit, the soul is with me, okay? So I was able to accept that, okay? But there's some people who don't accept that. There's some people who will not accept that, okay? And once again, that's them. That's them, okay? But don't let that be you. So, with that being said, whoever's watching, whoever is listening, I hope you could take something from this video and apply it to your life in a positive way that results in some positive changes. I really do, okay? With that being said, that's the video. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.